All right. Okay, we will get started then. And hopefully you can hear me now. Okay. And so welcome back to the school year. And I'm just going to slide into our first page.
There, you got it.
So we call these sessions Kaffee und Kuchen. And that's a time to talk and share ideas and enjoy some cake. So I'm really sorry that we're doing this virtually because we won't be able to share cake with you. Our dual language teachers are actually meeting together, socially distanced and enjoying some cake, thanks to our new teacher, Frau Berlin, and Mrs. Hertz, Layla's mom, who also baked us a cake. Hopefully when we get to come back and do this in person, we'll be able to share Kaffee und Kuchen as well as ideas. So we will have these on a regular basis. Dual language immersion, some of you are brand new to it this year, some of you have been in it for 6 years, but it's a way of educating students in an instructional setting that allows them to acquire a second language through subject content instruction, educational discourse, and social interaction. So what's different about this compared to a world language class is that we're learning content in the classroom. And so in Dalton Public Schools and in immersion programs throughout the country, immersion students follow the same standard-based curriculum as their peers in a regular monolinguistic classroom, in a regular English classroom. So they're still learning the same content, but we're adding the medium of a foreign language. At Brookwood, we have team teaching partnerships in kindergarten through 4th grade with 2 different teachers. The English-speaking teacher teaches English language arts and social studies in English, and the German-speaking teacher teaches math and science in German, not in Spanish, to immerse students in both languages. This year, we're trying a new model in 5th grade, really with the goal to getting students ready for middle school. So in 5th grade, students are learning social studies and science, and they have an additional segment of German language arts with Frau Berlin. So that's a new model that we're piloting this year with our pioneer students, our 5th grade students. We do ask that parents make some commitments to the program. And we're really excited to see so many people here today because we have people that really want to learn more about immersion in education, people who are wanting to understand what's going on with their child in the classroom, and they're attending these kinds of meetings to learn more about it. We also really emphasize that it's a long-term commitment. The benefits that research shows our students will gain from being in an immersion program really only start to emerge in 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. But those benefits are huge according to the research that we've looked at. So we ask that parents think about this as a more long-term commitment rather than just something that you try for a few years and then move on to something else. We do love it when parents find ways for their children to use the language outside of school or to learn about the culture outside of school. And then, of course, we always emphasize that there, especially with our younger students, it can be quite demanding to be in a dual language program all day long, and sometimes just being extra sensitive to the fact that they might not be ready to come home and perform in German for you because they've been doing it all day long. But finally, one of the things we really want to do is enjoy the challenges, but celebrate the results. It's amazing when you see what students can do in the language. This is something we've not talked about as much in the past, but there are 3 pillars of dual language education. And if you've been in any of these sessions before, you know that we want our students to be to achieve academically, to demonstrate high levels of academic achievement, And we do that. We follow our standards-based curriculum in Dalton Public Schools. We want to graduate students with high levels of language proficiency in 2 languages. So we're looking at bilingualism and biliteracy as being the goals. And then we also focus on sociocultural competence. We want students who appreciate and understand diverse cultures. So those are what we call the 3 pillars of dual language education. It's not just about learning German. There are other layers and aspects to it. So I wanted to highlight some of the culture events that we've been adding into our program the last few years. And these are some fantastic photographs taken at the Creative Arts Guild Festival a few weekends ago. And we had all of our German teachers participate, even with Frau White from the high school. So it was just a wonderful event. And it is every year in September. So just put that on your calendar for September's. We also have Tag der Einheit, the Day of German Reunification, that some of the older grade levels here will learn a little bit more about. Meet a German Day is coming up, where a couple of the grade levels will just get to Zoom with a German speaker and learn a little bit more about the culture. Our Martinstag Lantern Parade has been a huge success over the last few years. So we will be doing that in some shape or form again this year in November. Nikolaustag is great for our primary students. They love the little surprise of in their shoes in December. And then, of course, our regular school programs, Earth Day and STEM Day, our German classes are very involved in those too. So we are working towards some additional cultural activities for our families, for our school. And that's one of the pillars. But one of the other pillars was graduating students who are bilingual and biliterate. And this is the area that our teachers have been working on this summer to really define that a little better. But the question I put out on the Kaffee and Kuchen was, how much German does my child know? It's a question we get all the time from parents. So how do I know how they're doing in German? How do I know what they can do? How do I know what they can say? And we try to share videos on Cecil, and we share what we can in conferences, but it has been something that's been a little harder to pin down. So this is an area that we have been working on this summer, and we wanted to share some of those things with you. Just making sure we're still good. Okay. So we focused this summer on the American Council of Teachers of Foreign Languages proficiency guidelines. So when we're talking about children or adults learning a language, the focus we want to have is on proficiency. And proficiency is what individuals can do with the language in terms of speaking, writing, listening, and reading in real world situations in a spontaneous and non-rehearsed context.
Okay.
So those are high goals. Can a student really do all of these things in a real world situation with something that they haven't necessarily prepared for, that hasn't been rehearsed, but do they have the language skills that they need to be able to do well, to be proficient in this kind of situation? And so we've looked at how we can start building those skills from kindergarten all the way up so that we are graduating students that are bilingual and biliterate. All right, now we have a video here. I could keep talking, but I found this video that's been created by the Utah schools, actually the Granite Schools District, and it explains it so much better than I could. And I'm going to try to play this. I'm just hoping that the sound will work. But it really explains very clearly what proficiency is and how students graduate up the levels of proficiency. So we're going to try and play this and hope that the volume works.
really learning the language. How can we know where they're supposed to be for their grade level?
I know it didn't play.
Let's email it to them.
All right. Yeah, I will. What I'll do is play it and not have the volume, maybe.
Okay.
All right. Let me see if I can do that. Okay. So can everybody hear me still? I'm going to try to play it without volume and see if that is going to work. And then we'll just look at the videos and see what some of the graphics are. And then after that, we'll send it to you. Okay, I don't think that's going to work either. So we'll have to send you this really good video. Unless taking this away and just playing this.
It's because you're on two things, I think.
Because I'm over there on the TV.
Yep. You just keep going.
Okay. All right. So we'll have to send you this video, but I really encourage you to watch it just because it is, it explains what we're talking about very, very clearly. But I'm going to go to the next slide because I do have a couple of slides in here that pull out some of the things that are in this video. Oops, not that. So one of the things that in the video talks about is that learning a language is like learning a sport. So think about your child as they're learning a sport. It takes a lot of training, a lot of practice sessions, and then a lot of trying that out in a game, and then going back to training and rehearsing and practicing some more. And it takes years and years for a child to learn the rules of the sport, how to play the sport well, how to control their body in the sport. It's not something that happens in a year. It takes time. And then, of course, sport is they play it in a real world situation. It's in a spontaneous and non-rehearsed context. Or another analogy is that it's like learning an instrument. It takes a long time to learn an instrument. You have to learn all the basic skills, the foundational skills before you can even start thinking about playing a piece. And then proficiency is when you can actually use that musical skill to perform in some way. But obviously there's different levels. There's a very simple level of performance, and gradually you get more and more advanced with more training and more exposure. So when you think about your child learning a language, think about how complex that is, and think about how long it really is going to take your child to become bilingual and biliterate to meet that goal. So the actual proficiency levels, they have them at 4 levels. You begin with the novice level, and some people call that the parrot level, but that's where we start. We're starting by memorizing words and phrases, by trying those out in simple practice situations, but then also maybe trying them out in a slightly new context. So even our kindergartner, first graders, and second graders create with the language. Moving on, you've got the intermediate level, but still that's called the survivor level. And that is where you are being able to create with the language and handle simple situations that you haven't necessarily prepared for, but you've got the skills you need to be able to communicate in those situations. But then most of the time you're still asking and answering questions around familiar topics. You've got a familiar base of vocabulary of language that you are comfortable working within. Moving on up, advanced is more of a storyteller or reporter. Now you can talk in detail, you can organize, you can share points of view, you can express your opinion. Still more in a familiar topics area, but situations can be more complicated. And finally, moving up to the superior level, you have abstract topics that you can talk about, you can hypothesize, you can support opinions, and you can handle unfamiliar situations. Now, that timeline takes a long time for a language learner to work through. And I'm going to show you a couple more slides that give you more of an idea about this. So here's the novice slide. And we like this slide because it not only tells you that this is where our kindergartners and our first and second graders live, not in the low area, but in the mid and high area. And it has this little briefcase over here. Each slide will tell us what career you could use novice level skills with or an intermediate level skills with. So for a novice has a limited range and really can't use their language in many contexts yet. As you move up to an intermediate level, and this is where our third, fourth, fifth, and middle schoolers will live, then we're creating even more with the language. We can handle familiar topics, simple situations in real life context, which means career-wise, we'd be equipped to be a receptionist, a cashier, a tour guide, a sales clerk, a firefighter, any of those careers here on the left side. But we want to keep going, and which is once again back to our long-term commitment. Advanced, as you move on in your language skills, and it does here say 9th and 10th, 11th and 12th. Dual language students might get to these at earlier grade levels, but look how advanced these careers are now. You could be a physician using your second language. You could be a financial advisor, a military linguist. Teachers are at the advanced level, police officers, social workers. And then finally, we're really getting up into the college level here, the superior level. You have to be at this level to be a lawyer in the language, a judge, a university language professor, and so on. So it's a progression, and superior is at the top of that progression. So I hope that explained the our overarching guidelines for our proficiency benchmarks in Dalton Public Schools. The video, when we send the video home with the recording, will also explain it very clearly. So I do hope you'll get to watch that video. But the final thing we wanted to share today is where we are in Dalton Public Schools with our language proficiency benchmarks. So this summer, we had a curriculum team of DLI teachers working to develop a draft of language and literacy proficiency standards for K-5. And when we say language and literacy, we've got to focus on the 4 skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. We want our students to be bilingual and biliterate. We have come up with some draft documents that we will be piloting this year in some of our DLI classrooms. We need to pilot those this year to see how they work with students in the classroom. And so that teachers can review and we can assess and revise them in the coming summer with the goal to being ready to report in the 2022-2023 school year. So that's where we are currently with our proficiency benchmarks. So this is what we're working on. We are piloting. We will review and revise the assessment rubric throughout this school year. And we will be working on not only the assessment rubric that teachers use in the classroom, but we'll be also looking at what the report card would need to look like to go home to parents in the following school year. And before we open up for questions, I wanted to show you a sample. And I'm probably going to show you the big sample on my screen because this screenshot doesn't work very well. Let's see if I can get that. Okay, so here is the sample, one of the samples we were looking at this summer. So this is again a report card out of Utah, and it's a first grade report card. And what we like about it is it shows the continuum. So this brown box here shows the goal at this stage for a first grader. But some students might not have reached that goal yet. They might be in the novice low. Some students might be reaching beyond novice mid to novice high. And then you can also see where they would step up to in the intermediate. So it gives good descriptions of what students can do in each area. So this would be the listening area and the speaking. And once again, it gives you really nice descriptions. You know, in the novice mid, in speaking, they can use single words or multiple words, short phrases, greetings, and so on. And then we've also got, like I said, we want to focus on literacy too, reading ability, and writing ability. And something I wanted to make parents aware of is that as we were researching and learning more about these proficiency levels, it takes time for a student to move from one area to the next. Students tend to live within a whole section, so within the novice area for almost 2 years before they move into the intermediate, mid, and high section. So just to be aware that language learning is a process, and it does take students, whether they're young or grown, it takes time. Now, that was all at this point I wanted to share. I know we do have a lot of people on Zoom. We might want to try to type questions in the chat just because of the volume issues we've been having. I can even open up the chat so that people can see the questions.
I've been talking for you.
Thank you. So if you have any questions, we'd love to try to answer them now. Obviously, if you have questions after, we can follow up. But at this point, if you're thinking of a question, if you are thinking of a question, probably somebody else too. So we would love to hear some of your questions. Okay, so the question was, in 5th grade, you mentioned they're being instructed in German English language arts or German language arts. What standards are involved? So in 5th grade, we are using the writing standards. We're trying to really give more time over to having students develop their writing skills in the language. So we're looking at the Dalton Public Schools writing standards. But also layering into that, we're looking at German language skills, because in order to write well, you also have to know German grammar. You have to be thinking about how you sound out the German language. But basically, in answer to that question, we are focusing mostly on the writing standards in 5th grade.
Good question.
And there was a follow-up question to that. Yes, they are still writing in English. Only a portion of their language arts time is in the German. It is not their entire language arts time. So only a portion of that English language arts block has been carved out for German. So they still have an English language arts block within their daily schedule.
There's another question. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there was another question about going on to the middle school. That's again for our pioneer students right now. And yes, we do have plans to meet with our 5th grade students. Our 5th grade parents coming up, but it probably will be later in the end of term 2 or the beginning of term 3 before we'll have that meeting.
Yeah, we're up here. There's another question. How do parents know?
Okay.
There.
Good question. The good question is, how do we as parents know how proficient our kids are? And is there something in place? Okay, we've talked about 6th grade. So as parents at this point, it's still a conversation with your teacher about where your child is. We are working on formalizing that process this year, which is the work we started this summer. We will be piloting the work during the school year in classrooms or in some of our classrooms, and then reviewing and revising that in the following school year so that parents will have a more formal picture of how their students are doing in the language, so how proficient their children are. So that was an answer to how do we know how proficient our kids are, and that's really what we're trying to do with this curriculum work. We're trying to answer that question. There's another question here about how parents can help at home, and I do think most of our teachers will say that what you can do at home, the best thing you can do at home is to support your child in English. If we're doing German and science in the classroom, I mean, math and science in the classroom in German, anything that you might want to do at home to support that in English is helpful. We have Happy Numbers is a great little program that we're currently using to support English, and that's a great reflection of that. I will say, if you do want to do any German enrichment, every child in our K-5 German program has been invited to our K-5 German enrichment canvas course. And there are some read alouds on there. There are lots of German cartoons on there that students can watch, as well as some other resources. So there is a German enrichment course if you want to look at any of those resources with your child. There was a question here, and it's a good question, and I really want to address this one. Would most subjects in German in 5th cause them to learn slower? Will they fall behind compared to other students? And in some of our previous sessions, we've addressed that question. And I know if you're new to the program, you wouldn't have participated in those sessions. What we have seen and what the research shows is if you learn the content in a foreign language, you know it in English. It does not mean you fall behind in any way. Once you've learned the content, that will transfer from the language to English. It is not something that delays your child in any way. And in fact, when you look at the data and the research that we've shared at other sessions, in our dual language immersions end up scoring as high as, and often most of the time, higher than students who have not been in a dual language program. Sorry, can you hear me now? Okay, so I'm not seeing any more questions. I will send this recording home, and I apologize for the poor sound quality that we had going on earlier. But I will send this recording home as well as the video that I really think is worth watching. We will try to have another parent session in the next, probably in term 3. In term 2, we tend to have our Kaffee and Kuchen is focused around our Martinstag parade, and it's a real celebration of German culture for children. But then in term 3, we'll have another parent session. But I'm always available via email or phone if you leave me a message. If you have questions, I'd love to answer them. And as well, of course, your children's teachers. We're all learning about proficiency and how to assess what your child can do in German. And so this project that we're working on now, I think it's going to be really informative for all of us, for teachers and parents. All right, stop my share. Thank you again for joining. we really appreciate everybody participating. We had a huge group of people. And we look forward to meeting you hopefully in person in the future. But if not, we'll see you again on Zoom shortly. Thank you very much.